This podcast is sponsored by Stream. Stream helps developers build engaging apps that scale to millions with performant and flexible chat, video, voice, feeds, and moderation APIs. SDKs powered by a global edge network and enterprise grade infrastructure. Hey everyone, welcome back to our second episode of This is Tech Talks, and we are in season 4. So during my first episode, I was alone here, so I felt really bad that I was missing my co-host. So Sonu made sure that he's here this time. Hey Sonu, how are you?
Hey Santosh, I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. So I was here. Happy New Year, by the way.
Yeah, happy New Year to all of you.
Great.
Yeah,
Happy.
everything's good so far. Starting busy, I guess, as always. Let's see what the year has planned for us.
So good things. Cool. So today we have our guest Nash. Hey Nash, how are you? And happy New Year to you as well.
Thank you very much, Santosh. Yeah, it's I'm excited to be here. It's been a good start of the year so far. It's very cold today in Boulder, Colorado. It's negative 20 Celsius, so very, very chilly day in Colorado. But I'm excited to be here and chat everything video conferencing with you all.
Oh, nice, nice. And so you just said minus 20, and then I was complaining about minus 6 here in Germany. So I think I stopped doing that.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's really, really cold today. We have a bit of an Arctic front moving through Colorado, so.
Oh, okay. I will not even ask about what's going on in at Sono's place. So
Yeah, you don't want to know. It's like we're at minus 12, and
yeah.
this week it's going to get to minus 25, I think.
Oh
Oh,
no, nope.
oh,
Yeah.
no, we are not talking about the cold now. Cool. So today Nash joined us to talk about like how you can implement your own chat and video platform, basically audio and video platforms. I'm sure like there are so many of you who might be wondering like what's the technology, like how it happens, what in case I don't want to actually don't implement my own and maybe just use some existing platform. And we'll answer all those questions here today. And Nash will be helping us. So before we go ahead and get started, so would you like to introduce yourself, Nash? What you do?
Yeah, so I'm Nash. I am the director of marketing at Stream. And yeah, my background started in engineering. I first started doing development on the web some time ago. And then I really moved into the mobile space. So I moved into Flutter when it was still very early in alpha, and I've been doing that for a very, very long time. I'm also a GDE for Flutter, so I know Santosh, that's something we have in common there. But yeah, I really enjoy working at the intersection of technology and business. So it's kind of fun to be able to work on a developer tool, but then also know how to build a developer tool as well. That's my specialty. At Stream, I started as a developer advocate back in 2020, and eventually kind of went on to leading marketing as a whole across the business. So it's been a really fun journey going from the weeds of engineering to the not so technical parts of marketing, and then getting to live in both realms essentially. So that's a little bit about me and what I've been up to over the last couple of years.
Nice, nice. There are three GDs on the call, so I just forgot to mention Sonu became an Angular GD last year at
Oh
the
wow,
yeah.
nice!
So
Congratulations.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, so audio and video, like so. Of course, like I remember, like I'm in past, like have tried to implement on my own, and I don't think so. The technology was there. It was probably like 6, 7 years back, but now it has like improved a lot. Maybe because of your machines, right? I mean, everything the machines you use have become more powerful. But what about you, Sonu? You have tried doing this on your own, audio and video
No,
streaming?
no, not yet. No, I would
Okay.
be interested to know, what the reasoning would be for me to build my own streaming platform, right? I can imagine the only valid use case for me would be to build it into my own application, right? Yeah, so I would be curious to hear Nash's thoughts on that as well.
So let's talk about like what audio and video streaming is, and then we'll talk about the technology behind that, right? So Nash.
Yeah, so audio and video streaming, it's notoriously something that is hard to build because there's so many different factors and devices and codecs that you have to take into account when building audio and video. These days, almost everyone is building audio and video with WebRTC, which is like the open source framework or protocol for building real-time streaming. It was essentially, it came about from Google. Now it's a community, it's a very vibrant community around it. It's supported by most browsers. browsers. You have like client libraries for Android, iOS, and most of the frameworks. So that's the standard that most people use these days when building voice and video. Zoom, notably, like they don't really use WebRTC. They use their own proprietary protocol. But all of the major providers, like let's say Google Meet uses WebRTC. Stream is built on WebRTC. Like a lot of the different video API providers out there are built on WebRTC. So it's kind of the ubiquitous standard when you're doing real-time video calling or live streaming or audio rooms. Most of the times, though, working with WebRTC can be a bit of a challenge. It is not the most documented of frameworks out there. It is not the most documented of things out there. So when you're building with WebRTC, like if you try to build video with WebRTC directly, a lot of times we see people struggle with either like silent failures, they struggle with the implementation, they struggle, with some of the libraries, etc. So the entire goal of our video API is to make it as easy as possible for developers to build real-time video calling, live streaming, and audio rooms into their app without being in the dark or without having to deal with the low-level parts of WebRTC themselves. We put a lot of time and effort into our SDKs and our documentation and our frameworks to help you build basically any type of video calling use case without having to like do it yourself and set up your own stun server, set up your own torrent servers, and maintain that infrastructure on your own. And the other interesting thing about video calling is, when there is a network delay or when there is a disruption in the person's connection. With chat, you can almost get away with it because, you're typing and let's say there's like a little lag or something. It's not that big of a deal. With video, if you have a lag or if you have a connection issue or a quality issue, people tend to notice very quickly. And that is also like a very difficult part about video conferencing or video calling. It's like if you try to build something with WebRTC and you try to roll this out and you try to scale it to a large number of participants, suddenly the performance aspect also becomes a really hard problem to solve, right? If you're building with WebRTC directly, chances are you're building with the peer-to-peer model, where one user connects directly to another user over WebRTC, and that's how they exchange their packets, and that's how the network works. The problem with that is if you try to scale that beyond just a couple of users, things start to break very quickly. You can imagine you have, let's say, 3 users all sending and receiving individual media tracks together, and then all of this is happening on device. It's a lot of work for that device to then receive those tracks, encode, render it, and then send the tracks back. So building WebRTC, like that's where the pitfalls start to come in, is like you can start building something very simple. You can build a very simple peer-to-peer application, no problem. But if you want to scale that beyond just a couple of users and you want to start having more advanced things as part of that implementation, that's where it really gets challenging for developers. And that's the problem that we are trying to solve. And we put a lot of time into that infrastructure and into that reliability part of it to help developers build and scale their video conferencing apps and their live streaming apps to a large number of users. We're one of the few API providers out there to use what's known as a SFU and an edge network style setup, meaning that we have a lot of servers around the world, and regardless of where these users or these end users are located, they can connect to the closest server, and those servers will all communicate with each other directly over very high data center links to ensure that the latency and the processing is optimal. So you don't run into problems where you get into a call with 10 people and suddenly you're really lagging or the network isn't keeping up, etc., etc. So that's a little bit about video conferencing. It's usually built around WebRTC. It's notoriously difficult to scale. Like building an initial one-to-one style setup between users is fairly easy. Like there's a lovely code lab by Google, for example, that teaches you how to do that. But the problem really comes in when it comes to scale, reliability, and just, like a good developer experience. Like it's actually really hard to work with the WebRTC directly. And over the period of us building our video API, we've had to go into the WebRTC source code and try to figure out how certain things work as well, because it's not always documented in the most straightforward way.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with WebRTC. Is that open source?
It is actually open source, yes.
Yeah, since you're looking into the source and trying to understand it, are you making contributions to it as well so others can benefit from it?
We have been like quite active in the WebRTC community. One of the things that we've started was actually creating a little course called WebRTC for the Brave, which is basically a collection of all of the different knowledge and all of the different resources that our team has kind of like built up and learned over the years, turned into basically a content or a tutorial for anyone looking to build WebRTC. So it includes things like what is an SDP? How do you handle SDP munging? How do you deal with different codecs, etc.? And the other thing that we've started doing is we've been building and maintaining open source WebRTC implementations on Android, on iOS, on Flutter examples. So depending on which version of the WebRTC core that you use, like, or depending on the platform, you might use a different version. So what we've been doing is we've been trying to standardize the version of WebRTC we use internally, and we've been publishing these as open source packages under our GitHub as well. So if anyone is using, let's say, WebRTC Android, and you're looking for the latest version of the WebRTC library on Android, we maintain that package for you. We handle building it, etc. So you can just come to our GitHub and you can use it if you like. So I pasted the links to some of those in the chat if anyone is interested.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
So one question, Nash. So I remember like in old days, whenever someone had like a video or audio, the way we used to show it was like just upload the video somewhere, audio somewhere, and then just like load it. Like we don't used to care about, okay, if it's a live stream or it's, even if it's a stream, right? It's like it's based on your end user, if they are able to see it or not. What do you think when this perspective changed? Like now, let's move away from the old way where we are hosting a video. Now let's start streaming this thing, right? Who brought this thing?
It's interesting, right? I think it's just as we move to a world that's more like interconnected and people are, trying to stay closer to people, and like you kind of see it in messaging as well, right? Like we used to have email and people would email each other, and then suddenly you have like text messaging, and then text messaging turned into IP messaging. So I think it's just like a natural like progression of like people wanting to be connected and wanting to have like another medium to stay connected. But it's really interesting that you say that, right? Because WebRTC is such an interesting framework that you can pretty much do any type of video conferencing with it. Like, everyone used to use Twitter Spaces or X Spaces back in the day. That's all WebRTC as well under the hood. Like, even though there's no video going on there, like you can use WebRTC, you can use our video API, for example, to have those audio room style use cases. Even StreamYard, right? Like if you want to have like a streaming solution where, or let's say Instagram Live, actually, where you're building this app and you want the ability for your users to go live and quickly view what they're doing in like this bi-directional way where like one person is streaming, the other people are viewing. You can also do this very easily with WebRTC and the video API. Like there's so many diverse use cases and apps that you can build with it. It's really interesting framework. It's a little bit different though compared to, let's say, the video on demand APIs that we used to previously use. Like if you were uploading a file to a service and then you were then transcoding that file and then playing back that file in multiple resolutions, that's a little bit different than the real-time aspect. Like we see people trying to use both, actually. Like if people are doing a live stream and they want to record the live stream and then play that back afterwards, they use a combination of that video on demand style and then the real-time aspect as well. But it's really fun to kind of see how things have evolved over time. We see a lot of people building with our chat and our video together, especially those like Slack huddle type use cases where you want to very quickly get into a call or get into a conference with someone.
So just for our listeners, right? I mean, we think about, okay, it's just like a live stream. I mean, just think about the technology behind that, because your audio, video, and then it's getting recorded somewhere, which is handled by a platform. And then you have a chat, which is also getting recorded somewhere. And then you're transferring all this data over the internet, which is possible now, like due to, as Nash said, right, due to the advancement in the technology. It was not available probably 10 years ago, but now it's available. Do you think like all the CPUs, or whenever we talk about like all this AI thing, this is also helping in improving this technology as well?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you also like, I think the biggest improvement there comes from the different codecs as well, right? Like you have AV1 that's really, really good for live streaming. VP9 is a really efficient codec for video conferencing as well. There's so many different codecs and like compression algorithms and all these things that's used now. One of the things that we do specifically is we use Opus and Opus DTX for our audio. So we send the audio tracks twice to ensure that, like if there's any loss or any issues, you still maintain some level of clarity. With live streaming specifically, it's a really interesting space, right? Because You have WebRTC live streaming that is super low latency, that's really fast, it works well for most use cases. But then you also have like the ingress and egress part of it. So like you have things like RTMP, or the real-time messaging protocol, that's used with live streaming. So if you, let's say you ever stream to Twitch, you've probably put in that RTMP key at some point. If you've used OBS to like use multiple cameras and layouts and all of this, you can use RTMP to bring that stream to different platforms. So that's also something that we've had to like build in support for, because we see a lot of people wanting to use RTMP. There's also HLS, which is like the bitrate streaming. So it gives you like the adaptive bit rates. It kind of allows you to do that 30-second rewind and all of that as well. So there's like the live streaming space is really, really interesting, because there's so many different ways you can go about doing a live stream. StreamYard is a good example of something where, we're recording this podcast right now, and we have the ability to stream to other platforms using RTMP and some of the different protocols. But we're also doing local recording where it records the camera on the device in really good resolution, and then it will probably save that and then sync it to the cloud afterwards. So like there's so many different styles of application that you can build with live streaming. There's so many different protocols and codecs you can use to help with that as well, to help with the efficiency of those live streams as well. So yeah, like AV1 is really, really good codec for that as well.
Would be interested to hear about like why should someone build their own audio or video streaming platform? Like who is your audience here?
It's really fun. Actually, we did a tutorial this morning with house programmers where they did a tutorial on building a custom like live streaming solution. It's really interesting because we see people like the developers we see trying to build their own solution. They try to do it for a couple of reasons. Mostly is to just avoid having their users go to another platform, right? Like, let's say you're building an app, and as part of your app, you have a community where users are interacting with each other. Like, let's say they're chatting, or let's say there's a forum or something. Most of the times we see users trying to keep that engagement in their apps, so they never have to leave, they never have to go to a Zoom, they never have to use Google Meet. Other times it's like people wanting that extra like control over the UX and the UI of their app as well. Like they want to have a very specific type of interaction. They want to have a very specific type of layout for their users. I remember talking to someone as well who wants to break the pattern that users might be accustomed to with video conferencing. Obviously, in the last couple of years, everyone's using Zoom, everyone's using Google Meet, so they're very familiar with this vanilla layout of tiles and controls at the bottom. Like I remember speaking to just one developer who was building an app, and they specifically wanted control over their layouts so they can do some really fun interactions there. They wanted to essentially have like custom like animation for their video like participant layout, and have some emojis and have some fun games and all of that as part of their meeting experience. So typically you see it mostly around like the UI UX part of it. A large part of it is also like wanting to keep and retain your audience within your application, so you're not losing your audience to an off-site platform. And then generally it's a little bit easier as well from the cost perspective, right? Like let's say you're developing your app, you're not having to pay for like one API for your messaging, and then you're paying for another API for like your video conferencing. It's really nice to just kind of have all of that under one roof, basically. But we see some really creative apps in the video space. I remember like a really fun app that we saw for Flutter actually was an app called like Calendar Clock. And it was basically to help people with dementia. So you would set time to take your medication, and then it would remind you, and it would open a link with family members to help you, basically get your medication for dementia. And it was one of the first applications we saw built with our Flutter SDK. And it's always really cool to see what developers end up building with your product, because when you start building it, you never quite think of the different possibilities that eventually come up.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm wondering if you have seen like a big trend increase, maybe around COVID or after COVID time, where people started to experiment more with this kind of technology because, everybody was like stuck at home, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely COVID, we saw an uptick in applications, specifically around chat, actually, people building chats. We still see really, really strong interest. We still see a lot of developers building applications around video calling, even post-COVID. Again, I think it's such a hard thing to build that, you put out an SDK there and then suddenly like a community starts growing around it. And you see developers contributing to it, especially like around like our Android SDK, for example. We always see like really interesting things from our Android community of them contributing back to our SDK or them contributing to like the WebRTC library, etc. So definitely we're still seeing a lot of developers build in the space, which is really exciting. Now with AI as well, like you see a lot of people trying to build different use cases around AI, which is also really, really exciting.
Question around the browser support, right? So if I'm not wrong, like of course we are streaming on web at the end, right? So where is actually browser coming into this picture? Like WebRTC, is it like supported by browsers or like how is doing it?
WebRTC has really good support across most browsers, which is great. And they also have like their client libraries are all native as well. You can natively use it on device as well. You don't have to go into a browser on a mobile, for example, which is awesome. But yeah, browser compatibility is something that a couple of years ago was still a little bit spotty, but these days you're not going to really have many issues using WebRTC on a browser unless you're using something like Internet Explorer or Opera or one of the more like niche browsers. But at this point, like it's very much mature, it's very much stable, it's a cornerstone of the internet at this point. So yeah.
So another question would be, of course, like you have seen people implementing their own platforms, right? And over the years, what do you think is the most challenging part?
The most challenging parts about building your own, I think, yeah, I mean, there's a couple like really interesting parts of it. If I had to pick the most challenging parts, like definitely support across different devices. Like every device, especially the ones in some of like let's say in APAC, for example, where there's a variety of devices and manufacturers and operating system versions, that is a challenge because if you're building WebRTC on your own and you don't support multiple codecs or you don't handle like codec negotiation, you don't support a couple other things, it's actually quite hard because the reliability tends to not be good. And then you also run into different issues while developing itself. And these issues are often not documented. So I remember like I worked on our Flutter SDK for video. So I was hands-on like coding, working on it together with a couple of our other engineers. I remember like very clearly having a lot of problems and a lot of implementation issues around like multiple like devices and multiple Android devices specifically in that area. So like device support and trying to get the codec negotiation part correct and trying to get some of those things correct is actually really, really hard. And it takes a lot more time than you think. Like if you're trying to build a solution for a very wide group of users, you're almost like in the US, we're almost spoiled a little bit because so much of the devices here are basically Apple devices. And, you get like plus or minus like a couple versions of the OS that you need to support. That is actually a lot harder outside of the US. And then you also have a lot many different devices, device manufacturers, supported hardware, et cetera, et cetera. It becomes a little bit of a matrix that you're trying to fill. So that is probably one of the most difficult parts about building with WebRTC. And it's also something that we try to smooth over as best we can in our SDKs. But yeah, obviously, like every device is a little bit different and every region is a little bit different as well.
And then you might be deprecating it as well, right? Probably you will not support after this version, or I mean, that's something
We
which is
try to, yeah, we try to like have as wide as a support range as we can. But yeah, like definitely on the older devices, we typically see a lot of problems. You also have to remember, right? Like on all of these older devices, they support older codecs. The hardware isn't as good, so like you run into cases where, let's say, the device gets hot. The device
Mhm.
gets hot, your video starts stuttering, and sometimes it might be like sometimes the developer might be like, okay, is this a problem with your servers or is this a problem with the device? And that's in that instance, it becomes really hard to debug, and it becomes a little bit of a case by case basis. just one of the things like WebRTC provides a lot of like statistics for you to go through and comb through. 90% of it you could probably ignore. We also try to have like on our dashboard, for example, a good like statistics and performance experience. So you can basically go in there, you can look at the performance of a call and try to debug for yourself where the issue is. Because sometimes it's not obvious, right? Like sometimes it is indeed the network and you are in a remote part of the world where the network is not bad. And then sometimes it is a user just joining from an Android device running Android 4 point something. When you're, again, like when you're developing in North America and Europe, you're probably like, oh, well, these users probably are like few and far between, and then you scale it to somewhere else, and you realize that there's still, yeah, very much an active user base out there that uses older devices, and you have to figure out how to support and make that experience good on those devices.
Like I was just looking at your SDKs on your website. I see a lot of web-related, I guess, SDKs. What about things like Electron or Node.js? Have you looked into that?
Definitely. So our SDKs will work with Electron just fine. We actually like really enjoy experimenting with different platforms at Stream. So Flutter Desktop, for example, when we were building the Flutter SDK, we used to always debug and build on Flutter Desktop because it's a little bit easier to just hit run and have it build on your desktop, and then you can be confident that it will work as well. We've done the same for like Electron, like we've played around, like we've done examples in Electron as well. Jay Wong on our DevRel team is a huge fan of Kotlin multi-platform, and he's been trying to like experiment with using WebRTC and the SDK on Kotlin multi-platform. I remember someone on our iOS team built an example in Apple's like VR environment as well. So pretty much anywhere WebRTC can run, and our SDKs could most likely be supported. Maybe not officially, but definitely by some community work, you can get it working. But yeah, we're huge fans of like just experimenting with different platforms and kind of seeing what's possible there. So definitely.
And I can see like a lot of tutorials as well, which is like someone posted about like how you can do it with Angular. So nice.
Yeah, Angular is a really interesting one. It's really interesting to see the momentum that the Angular team has recently. It's really fun, especially the recent releases of Angular. But yes, you can very much, you can definitely build with Angular as well.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think apart from this, I think you support people can build their mobile apps, web apps, anything else, or
Yeah, mobile apps, web apps. We're experimenting a little bit with AI. So if people want to build, let's say, a chat with a AI bot, that's something that we already support. We're also looking at, let's say, if you want to talk to AI, that's also something that we're currently like experimenting with and working on. So we're continuing to just experiment and play with different like integrations and different technologies as they come around. And we're always working with the community as well, right? Like, so if you are building with video or you're building WebRTC, and even if you're not using Stream, like, you know, we enjoy just like being in the community and talking to the other developers building with the technology. Like, it's not everyone's first choice. Like, no one, I don't think anyone wakes up one morning and they're like, yes, I'm going to go build my custom WebRTC application. I don't, you know, if you do, good for you. But I don't think the majority does this. So, you know, we're always like trying to contribute back as well, whether that's our open source WebRTC libraries on the mobile platforms, or, you know, we're putting out content on WebRTC for to kind of help developers learn about protocol, like help developers learn about different ways you can build applications with WebRTC. So, yeah.
so. What's your biggest thing which you are planning to do in 2025? I mean, you can skip this question if you want to, but probably you may already have planned that, okay, this will be our biggest release in 2025.
We have a lot of interesting and fun releases coming up in 2025. I don't want to give away too much, but I think you could probably guess a little bit just by looking at Twitter and, well, sorry, X, and, you know, the general state of where development is going. I think it's really interesting the time period that we're in right now. Like, you're seeing so much advancements being made in the AI space. Like you see like Gemini Live, where you can just talk to an AI, or you can just talk to an LLM. You see a lot of advancements being made in just like overall quality and stability of the platform. So let's say it's interesting, like you build a video conferencing platform or video API, and it takes a lot of work to just get everything working to the level that you want. So we're putting a lot of time into fixing a lot of the different like edge cases and stability and quality and SDK support and device support. So definitely stay tuned. Like follow us on Twitter, follow us on our blog if you're interested in some fun like technical tutorials and technical integrations with not just WebRTC, but we also have like a chat API, a feeds API, a moderation API. So if you're building anything that requires real-time communication or real-time communities, definitely reach out and give our API a try, and we can work together on helping you build something.
And actually, interesting thing which I found is like you give $100 per month free. Is it?
Yeah, so we have a Maker account, and our Maker account is for developers and indie developers wanting to build an application with Stream. Let me back up. We have a free account, which is already like a really good tier to help you get started in your development journey across all of our products. So all of our products have a free account that you can just build with. And then on top of our free account, we have another tier called our Maker plan or our Maker account. And the Maker account is for developers and small businesses who are building, but they don't really have revenue yet, or they don't have funding yet, and they need that extra bandwidth, or they need that extra amount of MAU or minutes for video or activities for feed. They can apply to the Maker account, and we are, like we always love supporting like our developers, our indie developers, or solo developers, or small businesses. So you can apply to the program, get approved, and then continue building with Stream. And there are limits on it, so that you never wake up to like a surprise bill for like many thousands of dollars. We don't want to do that. So the Maker account is a great way if you're building an indie app or you're building a solo app and you need some extra MAU on top of what we already give in our free plan. You can apply, and we'll be happy to set you up with this account. And it's really fun to see what our development community builds on top of the Maker account. There's some really, really fun applications we see coming out of the Maker program.
I will add the link in the video description so people can find it. So thank you, Nash. I mean, I think we are almost at the end of the discussion. So if you have anything else to add, just let us know, or maybe we can wrap up by like we generally ask our guests to actually promote anything, like apart from, of course, like the things we talked about, maybe your own personal stuff you have been doing streaming or something. You are a GD, so you might be building something. So
Yeah, let's see. What am I working on these days? Actually, a really fun app that a really good friend of mine is working on is called Meandering Sleep, built in Flutter, and it uses uh, AI for you to basically read bedtime stories. I would highly recommend it. It's from a really great developer who is working on it in the Flutter space. So definitely give it a try. Definitely check it out. As for me, I'm always like tinkering with different things. I'm the type of developer that I have an interest that's like very broad. So on any given weekend, that could mean doing some fun stuff in Python and tweeting about it, or going back to mobile and just trying to create some designs and some UI patterns in Flutter, or something in between. So if you're interested in like random things in technology and the occasional hot take here and there about what's going on X, definitely give me a follow. My handle is on the screen. But yeah, definitely give Meandering Sleep a try. It's from a really great developer, and I think it's a really fun application that you'll find some joy in.
thank you. We'll add this to our notes. So this is it. I think we are almost done with the podcast. So thanks again, Nash. Thanks for your time. And it was like really great conversation about stream and as well as the technology behind audio, video. And we also talked about a little bit of history. If people are not aware, this is something which was not never possible a few years back, but now people are doing it. And thanks for answering all those questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It was really fun to just chat about some WebRTC things for a bit. And yeah, if you end up if anyone ends up building anything with our API, and you want to provide feedback, or you want to get in touch or just chat about what you're building, come say hello. I'm pretty active on X, on Threads. And we're always looking for feedback from our developers. Like that's kind of how you learn, that's how you grow. So I just always come by, say hello.
Great, thank you, and thanks again, Sonu, for joining for this episode, and probably I'll see you for another episode as well.
Yeah, no worries. Always a pleasure.
So,
Thank you.
bye everyone.